One of the things that characterizes the modern Democrat Party is they say a lot of things that would actually be classified as super racist. As in, if you are this color, there is an issue with you. And of course, white men, who I believe, Buck, represent 30% now of the American population, roughly. White men are the bane of all evil. We are the cause of everything that is ill in the world. And it's amazing how often Democrats just come right out and explicitly say white men are the problem. And I saw this from our good friend Ilhan Omar, who is a representative of Congress from Minnesota. She was doing an interview. I think this was an interview with Al Jazeera. The team can confirm with me that that is true because, of course, no one pursues the truth more than Al Jazeera. And she said that everybody out there should be fearful of white men. Listen to cut 7.
I would say our country should be more fearful of white men across our country because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country.
Okay. Now, leaving aside, Buck, unless she's referring to Dr. Fauci, which is a good joke that I saw out there. Leaving aside Dr. Fauci, is this racist in your opinion, Buck, or super racist? How would you define this?
Well, it's certainly under the rules that we all have to live by, which is that we're told you're not just allowed to state statistics about groups if it is damaging to the perception in any way or could be perceived as theoretically damaging to that group, that it's racist. I mean, pointing out, at least according to the left, that Asian Americans dramatically outperform everybody else on the SATs. It's a statistical fact, but if you say it in front of some people on the left, they get very upset about it. They don't like that. How dare you talk about, and making math skill jokes when it comes to the Asian American community is not funny. It is racist, things like that. In this context, white people are still a majority in America. So saying that a majority of anything occurs within the white community doesn't really tell you very much. If you want to talk about per capita, that would be a really interesting discussion on a whole range of topics. But I don't think we're allowed to have that discussion.
Let's have it. Because I actually, so this was Al Jazeera, by the way. After Ilhan Omar's comments last night, first of all, we have really reliable data. And you and I talk about this, and I wrote about it quite a bit in my book as well, because I've long been of this opinion. There's lots of noise in data on crime. Because, for instance, let's say you live in a city and your expensive bike gets stolen outside of your house, but the police never come to look into this. They're not going to be able to do anything. Then the odds that you might call the police and say, hey, I was the victim of a theft, my property was stolen, is low. It doesn't mean that your neighborhood is safe or that crime isn't an issue. It's actually the opposite. You're so convinced that nothing will come of it that you just say, I'm not even going to worry about this, right? Even though losing your expensive bike when it was chained outside of your house, let's say, is a big deal. Buck, maybe with you, when you would have lost your scooter back in the day.
Too soon.
Tears streaming down your face, but I don't know that maybe you call the police about it because that's a relatively minor crime in the context of everything else. A super serious crime, because I think this is super racist, but a super serious crime would be murder. I.e., if you are killed violently, it's hard to hide the fact that you were killed violently. And I went and looked at the most recent FBI stats. And you know what? I saw something that maybe Ilhan Omar's never bothered to actually look at. And that is this. 6% of the population, roughly, 6.5% of the population, let's say, black men, commit over half of all murders. Almost all of the victims here are black as well, right? Because you're most likely to kill people of the same race as you. Despite the fact that the media covers white people committing crimes against black people as if it is somehow a epidemic, most murder occurs inside of your racial group. White people tend to kill white people. Black people tend to kill black people. Black people kill way more than any other ethnic group in the country. 6.5% of the population commits over half of all murders. Buck, on a per capita basis, this is off the charts staggering. Now, I don't think that you should judge anyone as a reflection of their race or their gender, right? I think that's racist. I think that's sexist. Judge individuals on their individual merit, on their individual ability, or as Back in the day, an esteemed man might have said, by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. That's what we should aspire to in the United States, and I think around the world. But what Ilhan Omar said is directly racist. It's also factually inaccurate. Black men commit off-the-charts levels of violence in this country. She may not know that because maybe she's not that intelligent, or she's just fine spreading lies because it ties in with Joe Biden saying the biggest threat in our country today is MAGA Republicans and domestic right-wing extremists.
To be fair, Ilhan Omar's skill set, anti-white racism is kind of a secondary concern. For anti-Semitism is really where Ilhan Omar shines.
That's where she makes that's where she's an elite talent. That's where she's a Hall of Fame level contender. So here's the thing: if a white Republican said what Ilhan Omar said and said, "Hey, the people we need to be concerned about in America today are, let's say, Hispanics," that is a huge story. If they said, hey, the people we need to be concerned about are overwhelmingly black men, which would be statistically accurate, that would be the number one story in America, and that political representative would be branded the worst racist in America. And you guys know all that I am true when I am saying this. So my question for you is, how do we defeat a world where we have created such identity politics, Buck, that both whom is speaking, the fact that Ilhan Omar is a black Muslim woman means that she isn't held to the same standard as a white Christian man would be, which is wrong, but also the group that she is speaking about, white men, you're allowed to say anything about. So both you have a protected class speaker in Ilhan Omar based on her identity, something that she did not choose, and you have a group, white men, that you can attack in a way that you couldn't anyone else. How do we, and this, I think this is a broad question for all of you on Friday as we roll into the weekend, how do we destroy the very fabric of this identity politics universe where Ilhan Omar is totally within her rights as a black woman to say this about white men, and a white man could never say this about any group in America without being absolutely lacerated? What should the standard be? How do we fix it? Easy question for you, Buck, on Friday.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's you don't even have to just look at this in the context of violence statistics or something like that. We have a culture where we're constantly told that there is systemic racism against non-white individuals, right? That is the line. The Democrats, corporate America, the media, Hollywood, that's what they've all adopted. Meanwhile, if you are the wrong race and you say a word that you're not allowed to say, your entire life and career and everything can be ruined and destroyed, no matter what context you say it in, by the way, which is, I think, just wrong. I think it's ethically and morally wrong that this is the rule
intent
that we
should
now
matter. It should be the foundation of how we judge any of this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You would think so, right? But no, that's how powerful this narrative is. And then on the other side of things, you can say absolutely anything you want about white men in our discourse. Anything. You can say that that the rapists are all white men. You can say that the murderers are all white men. Whatever. You can say anything you want, and there are zero professional, cultural, or other consequences really whatsoever. I mean, you just know you can do that and say that. So this is how far it's gone. And this is, I think, something that when you look at wokeness, it can sound very academic to a lot of people. We're like, well, we're looking at DEI training, all of this stuff. We either fight for a standard where everyone is treated based upon, as you said, treated on who they are, not how they look or what their ethnicity is, or else you're always just dealing with this. The only consistent standard has to be human beings or individuals. We're all equal in God's eyes and in the eyes of the law, truly equal in the eyes of the law, not, well, historic. No, that's not how it goes. So it's essentially just really the fight for objective truth and objective standards. That's what it actually comes down to. Because what they want is always, and this is what intersectionality, which you don't hear a lot anymore, that term became very popular a few years ago. Intersectionality, some people say, is effectively racial Marxism, which is where society is just interlocking racial groups with different levels of oppression. And we all have to become familiar with them, and everything must be judged through that prism. This is completely unworkable for a society. It's insane. It's also immoral. But it has become very common. And Democrats, if you ever see like certain Democrats, they'll sit there And, it reminds me of the Gavin Newsom thing, for example, with Adam Carolla many years ago. And that was many years ago. That was over like a decade ago, where and this is about Hispanics. He just says, well, why do so few Hispanics in your state of California have a checking account? It's entirely free. You just walk in and get a checking account. So why is that the fault of society? And all Gavin Newsom knew was that the blame must be put on other, on the system. And that's why he had no answer for it whatsoever. You see that over and over again, that all the Democrats know are those baseline rules. You can always blame the system, and by the system, they mean white people.
I would just point out that you probably will not see or hear that clip discussed anywhere and on the left in America. But they would defend it. If it turned into a story, they would be like, oh, yeah, well, this is totally acceptable. And I just bring it back to, as a part of the 2024 Republican primary race, and certainly into the election itself, I hope the eventual nominee comes over the top with a lot of these facts and helps to... The one thing I would say about Trump, that in terms of discourse, he's proven that the American public does not believe in cancel culture, and they're not seeking to fire someone over a slip of the tongue. And I think sharing actual facts is the only way, Buck, we can ever solve anything in this country. And if you really wanted to reduce murders, you have to point out who's actually committing the murders and where they're occurring, which is the foundation of trying to keep less of them from happening. And that brings to bear something we mentioned earlier, which is, I'm sure you saw, and we talked about it a little bit, the Oakland NAACP. They put out a pretty fascinating statement where they just kind of threw their hands up and finally said, hey, we've been sold a bill of goods out here in the Bay Area, and we're all reaping the consequences of the lies that have been sold about how to make our communities safer. Yeah.
We've reached out to trying to get in touch with Bukele, the president of El Salvador, because to take a country that was one of the most violent in the world and in a number of years make it one of the safest in the Western world, at least, it's remarkable. But he did this really crazy thing where he just decided we're going to enforce the law and lock up criminals who are a threat to people, irrespective of what the UN human rights groups complain about, and irrespective of what the demographics are. It is 99% men and 99% MS-13 and other gang members. So he just goes, we're going to lock people up and we're going to keep the other 99% of society safe. So it's interesting what happens when you do that.